Kaivalya Pada. The third chapter mentions several siddhis of a yogi who is accomplished in samadhi. There are nearly 35 to 38 siddhis in the third chapter. These siddhis pertain to body, mind, senses, elements, matter, prana and nature, the prakriti. The third chapter mentions the process of these siddhis, the nature of these siddhis, the effects of such siddhis. The fourth chapter begins by mentioning that all those siddhis can come not only through samadhi but also some other means, such as birth, such as herbs and medicines, or by mantras, the magic of mantras, and by austerities. So there are other modes of attaining the same siddhis mentioned in the third chapter which come by samadhi. One of the glorious such siddhis is mind-boggling siddhi called Jatyantara Parinama. This is a sort of inter-class change. This means that a thing from one class can be changed into another, such as a rose can be converted into granite. Now rose is a flower class and granite is a stone class. So the rose can be converted into granite. So also elephant into eagle. Now elephant is a animal, and eagle is a bird. So also a lake into hill and river into mountain range. Now these postulations appear to be no less than myth. But the intellectually rational man would be induced to reduce the mysticism to something very, very mythical. Patanjali presents a brilliant rationale behind such seemingly observed miracles. He says, in the fourth chapter, he begins to say that the primordial matter is the source raw material, primeval matter for any matter or object or phenomenon. Prakriti is the primordial matter, primeval raw material for any phenomenal thing in this universe. The Prakriti is omnipotent and source of all manifestations. Thus, interclass conversions are as simple as clay art. What is in clay art? The clay elephant can be, with no difficulty, turned into clay eagle. If you are given a lump of clay, from lump of clay you can make an elephant, and with no difficulty you can convert the elephant into eagle. This is what the clay art is. So here in the nature, Prakrut elephant can become Prakrut eagle. Prakrut elephant can become Prakrut eagle. Prakrut lake can become Prakrut hill. Prakrut river can become Prakrut mountain. That is, natural elephant can become natural eagle. Natural river can become natural mountain. Natural hill can become natural lake. The yogi who has conquered the elements, conquered the Prakriti, conquered the nature, can transform one manifestation into another. through the powers of samadhi. The powers of samadhi, mantra, tapa, aushadhi can perform such siddhi of interclass conversion, interclass transformation called jatyantara parinama. But here what seems is that all these instruments such as janma, aushadhi, mantra, tapa seem to be instruments. They seem to be instrumental cause behind such siddhi. They seem to be sponsors of such siddhis. But Patanjali tells us something else. He says, they are not instrumental. Janma, aushadhi, mantra, tapa, samadhi, these modes of attaining siddhis are not instruments for such conversions. They are not instrumental, they are not sponsors, because the nature itself is omnipotent, omnipresent, absolutely abundant everywhere in this universe. Any phenomenalism is natural to nature. Any phenomenalism is natural to nature. Elephant becoming eagle is natural to nature. The lotus becoming granite is natural to nature because both are natural. Just as the water has a nature to flow, and the fielder, the husbandman, irrigates the field by building the bunds and breaking the bunds, the mantra, tapa, samadhi merely work like the husbandman working in the field. They just remove the obstacles and break the delimitations for a thing to be that and not else. Once the obstacles are removed, anything can cease to be what it is and can become something else. The yogi is also capable of multiplying himself physically and psychically. Yogi can become multiple and escalate his activity potential. He can simultaneously do multiple of things, although he may perform diverse activities with number of manifestations, number of fabrications of his own body and mind. Still, he will work all those out under presidency of one source of I-ness. Thus, there will be one I-ness, one source consciousness, even if the yogi multiplies himself by 100 or 1,000. An interesting question comes up here. That is, if we implicate ourselves with one manifestation and with one mind at a time, what will happen to a yogi who multiplies himself? Will he not implicate himself with Nirmanakaya and Nirmana Chitta? No. When a yogi multiplies himself and increases the activity potential, yet he does not add to bondage potential, because being a yogi, his deeds are neither virtuous nor vicious, neither white nor black, nor even brown or mixed. His deeds are neither black nor white, neither virtuous nor vicious. Thus, multiplication of activity does not add to fruition at all. Then comes an interesting topic. This is the topic of karma and reincarnation. The law of karma says, as are deeds, so are corresponding vasanas. As are vasanas, so are tendencies. As are tendencies, so are inclinations. As are inclinations, so are motivations. As are motives, so are tendencies. As are tendencies, so are deeds. Thus, we are caught in the circle. This is the circle that we have in karma, and we are caught in the circle. Thus, the past deeds become womb of present deeds, and present deeds become womb of future deeds. We may collect tendencies in one life, but may actualize those in some other life. Thus the vasanas are capable of transmigration. That is why we have reincarnations. And the topic of eschatology comes here. Now for instance, if one is qualified for a dog class life in the next life, on account of deeds in present life, if the next life is to be of the dog class, then what happens? One recollects the tendencies of dog class on the point of death in this life. Yamati sagati. So on the point of death, the Shwana vasanas are recollected and one heads towards dog class manifestation, heads towards womb of dog and takes birth as a puppy. Thus the impressions of dog class called Shwana vasana from one of the past incarnations comes handy to be recollected on the point of death in present life. The subtle body contains vasanas of 8.4 million life classes. 84 lakh yoni. 8.4 million life classes. This is an archive of vasana. Our subtle body, our sukshma sharira, is an archive of vasanas. Here comes a question. What was the source for the first manifestation in any class? See, today we have the dog class impression of some past life. That past life had impression of some other past life. That past life had impressions of some other past life. But what about our first manifestation as dog? Patanjali answers, this question is logical, but only in the plane of temporal world. We are speaking of something eschatology and subtle body, therefore this question is not valid. Answer is that our vasanas are beginningless. We are all beginningless. There is no question of first birth. There is no question of our first birth anywhere, anytime, in any class. We have been all eternal. Our vasanas are beginningless. Now when such a theorem is given that we are all beginningless, our vasanas are beginningless, the question is asked here, let the vasanas be endless. If the vasanas are beginningless, let them be endless. Then it would mean that there is no emancipation. This nullifies the concept of Kaivalya and liberation. So Patanjali sets out answering these formidable questions. The vasanas are no doubt beginningless, but they are not a thing in themselves. Vasanas are not thing by itself. They are an assembly of four factors. They are assembly of hetu, phala, ashraya, alambana. They are assembly of hetu avidya, phala, purushartha, ashraya, chitta, alambana, vishayas. If the components are dissembled, there is no composite. Thus, if the four factors are dissembled, there are no vasanas actually, and then there is something like potentiality and latency of things. Nothing can be destroyed, nothing can be created. All that is there eternally, beginningless and endless. But the thing is that something is either potentially there or latently there, if not actually. Therefore, we are not speaking of destruction of vasana in Adhyatma. There is never something like destruction of vasana, because what exists cannot really be destroyed. The vasana are really not destroyed, as does the popular belief says. The popular belief says that in Adhyatma, vasanas are destroyed. But that is not true. Vasanas are never destroyed. You see, each of the component of vasana is guna, is sattva-rajatama. Avidya is sattva-rajatama, purushartha is sattva-rajatama, chitta is sattva-rajatama, alambana vishayas are sattva-rajatama. Everything is gunas. Everything is guna. Thus there is nothing like destruction as the ecology postulates. Now comes a new question. If everything is guna, why postulate Atma? Why postulate a transcendent principle? Why postulate the soul as knower? Why not endorse with panpsychism of we Buddhists? This is what a Buddhist asks a question to Patanjali. Why do you postulate Atma? Why don't you endorse with our philosophy of panpsychism, sarva manovada or vijnanavada? Everything is mind. When Atma cannot be shown, cannot be seen, cannot be perceived, cannot be cognized, why postulate such an agnostic principle, which has no place in reality of business of life? In business of life, the acceptance of soul or not acceptance of it doesn't matter. Whether one is atheist or theist, that doesn't matter in business of life. So why postulate Atma? Patanjali said answering, no, everything is not mind. Objects are not mind, but are independent of mind. Mind is like moon, illumined by the soul. Like the moon is illumined by the sun, the mind is illumined by the soul. Like the moon is illumined by the sun, the mind is illumined by the soul. Thus the mind is not knower essentially. Although in our functional state, in our temporal state, the mind is knower. Now your mind is knowing what my mind knows and what I speak. I speak what my mind knows, and what I speak is heard by you, and you know, your mind knows what you have heard. So it is all mind here. I speak my mind and your mind knows. But Patanjali tells us, no, the mind is not the knower. Mind is not the essential knower. There is something like ever knower, sada jnata. There is something like ever knower of the mind. That is the soul. It is never changing principle. It is immutable principle. It is never moving principle. It doesn't move. Never changes. Never mutes. Thereafter the panpsychists are refuted with different arguments presented by Patanjali, and also very convincingly the panpsychism is refuted, Vijnanavada is refuted, all mind philosophy is refuted. The non-soulistic philosophers, Anatmavadis, those who do not believe in soul, such as the Buddhists, they question whether the soul should be just believed in and not at all experienced. Is the soul something that just to be believed and not experienced? The soul is imperceptible, incognizable, ingraspable. Patanjali says, no. The pure mind can experience the soul. Samadhi can experience the soul. Such a yogi is called Vishesha Darshina. Samadhi is the process of soul discernment, Atma Sakshatkara. Intuitive mysticism can divulge the soul, can reveal the soul, can give the vision of the soul. This is called Atma Sakshatkara. Such a vision results into great transformation in the life and outlook of a yogi. Now the chitta is Kaivalya gravitated as against ours, which is Bhoga gravitated. It is also discrimination inclination as opposed to ours, which is indiscrimination inclined. The chitta is soul worldly, while ours is object worldly. Then there comes a torrential rainfall in the mind of yogi, in the heart of yogi, in the psyche of yogi. It is downpour of viveka dharma. It is downpour of discrimination. It is downpour of viveka khyati. And with that downpour of viveka khyati, all the clouds in the heart are blown out. All the kleshas, karmas and vasanas are totally blown out. The atmosphere of the heart is clear, like we get clear atmosphere after heavy downpour. Now this is the downpour in the heart. With that comes highest intellection called prasankhyan. And the journey towards Kaivalya begins. Then there is total isolation of the soul from all aspects of Prakriti. The Prakriti merges into the primordial neominal phase. That is absolute freedom, that is absolute isolation, that is Kaivalya, that is moksha, that is nirvana. Here ends the brief description of the 4th chapter. Now let us proceed to take up a reading of the 4th chapter. Kaivalya Pada. The 3rd chapter dealt with the siddhis. It mentioned the mind-boggling siddhis and process and the rationale behind those supernormal achievements of body, mind, breath and senses and prana were mentioned. All those siddhis were through samadhi called sanyama. But we come across many mystics who have supernormal powers, though they are not yogis. Thus there are some other means of attaining those glorious siddhis. Patanjali begins the 4th chapter by mentioning the other modes of attaining those siddhis. Janmaushadhi mantra-tapas-samadhija siddhayaha. Those glorious siddhis may be attained by birth, like a genius glory man, genius miracle man, or even by drugs, by certain herbs and medications, or by mantra, by magic of mantra, or by austerities, or through the yogic process of samadhi explained in the 3rd chapter. Janmaushadhi mantra-tapas-samadhija siddhayaha. The yogis, through their glorious powers, are known to be miracle men. Yogis can effect mind-boggling transformations. Yogis can work out inter-class transformations called jatyantara parinama. Human can become celestial by grace of yogis. Terrestrial can become celestial by grace of yogis. Celestial can become infernal by the curse of deities. Now this is really an incredible transformation. This is interclass transformation. We have several instances in our mythologies that a sage curses or blesses and something is radically changed. So these are incredible, unbelievable, inconceivable transformations. They are really so inconceivable to human intelligence. Thus we call those changes as miracles. Patanjali provides a rationale to demystify the interclass transformations called jatyantara parinama. Jatyantara parinama prakriti apurat. The modifications and transformations of the nature of interclass changes is by channelizing the primordial matter for relevant change, and this matter is available in plenitude. You see, all manifestations ensue from primordial matter called prakriti. All matter is evolute of the primordial matter called prakriti. Thus, the yogi can transform one manifestation into another, and these miracles are as simple as a software expert working out graphics. You see, in graphics in computer, horse can become elephant, horse can be changed into elephant, elephant into lotus, lotus into mountain. In graphics it is all lines, and therefore the lines can make such transformations. Here it is Prakriti, it is everything Prakriti, therefore Prakriti can also be so changed with the powers given by siddhis. Just as I told you, in clay art, clay elephant can become clay eagle with the skill of the hands. Here it happens with siddhis, but still the siddhis as they might appear are not instrumental causes of such transformations. See, for our logical brain it appears that these siddhis are instrumental for such miracles. Patanjali here provides a very invaluable disillusionment. He says they are not instrumental. Samadhi is not instrumental. Janmaushadhi, mantra-tapas-aus are not instrumental for such transformations. Nimittam aprayojakam prakrutinam varnabedahatu tataha kshetrikavat. The causes of miracles such as Janma, Aushadhi, Mantra, Tapa and Samadhi are not the causes of the instrumental causes, but they work like in the field the husbandman piercing obstacles and allowing the water to flow. You see, just as in the field the water flows by its own nature, and the farmer or the husbandman makes the beds and breaks the beds and irrigates the field. It happens here too the same way. Our vices put limitations on our abilities. Our vices put limitations on our abilities, but the tapas, mantra, aushadhi or samadhi can break these limitations, these barriers, and that's how the matter can flow freely and such transformations can take place. The yogis have mind-boggling creative powers. Yogi can create minds. Yogis can fabricate several copies of his own mind and his own body and his own manifestation. This is called nirmana kaya, nirmana chitta. Yogi multitudines himself, and thus several acts are carried out simultaneously. You see, we encounter lots of limitations by being monophast. We are all monophast and not manifest. We are not manifest, we are monophast. We are all mono beings, we are not multi beings. We have pair of eyes, pair of ears, pair of legs, pair of hands, a mind, a brain, a body. We don't have several bodies, several hands, several legs, several minds, several brains. We don't have. That's why we are all monophast and not manifest. But yogi is manifest with his powers. The yogi multitudines himself, multiplicates himself and breaks all limitations in the abilities arising out of logistics. Yogi becomes multi-handed, yogis become multi-legged, yogis become multi-sensed, yogis become multi-minded, yogis become multi-brained, yogis become multi-bodied. This is called nirmana kaya and nirmana chitta. Now here comes a problem, a question rather. If a yogi multiplicates himself and each manifestation starts working in discord with other manifestations, the conditions would be more complicated than being any facility. See, it seems to be a facility that yogi multiplies himself so he can do several acts at one and the same time. He can be at several places at one and the same time, carry out several acts at one and the same time. But this seems to be a complication and less a facility if there is a discord in all these manifestations. You see, we find ourselves difficult to coordinate ourselves with one body and one mind. What would happen here? Yogi has several minds and several bodies. Therefore, it tells us that all those minds and bodies emanate from same asmita, the same I-ness. The yogi, therefore, multiplicates himself but does not implicate himself. Patanjali says, Nirmana chittani asmita matrat. Created bodies and mind proceed from one and the same original egoism, original psyche, original consciousness. Therefore, pravrutti bede prayojakam chittam ekam anekesham. Although there being difference of activity because of fabrications in body and mind, there is one source mind which is director mind. There is one source mind which is director of many. Now, we with one mind and one body at a time implicate ourselves in karma. What must be happening to a yogi who multiplicates himself with several bodies and several minds? Does he not astonishingly increase the karma potential, therefore also bandha potential? Does he not also increase the shackles of bondage? No. Although the activity potential is astonishingly increased, he does not have to bother about bondage. After all, he is a yogi. He is like lotus petal. Although in water, lotus petal is untouched by water. Although in mire, it is untouched by mire. Similarly, the yogi is. Therefore, he is devoid of any glue of bondage or mesh of bondage. The fabricated body and mind through the other means such as janma, aushadhi, mantra, tapa. If the same siddhi is attained by birth, by herbs, by incantation, by austerity, all those are subjected to such implications because they are not yogis. Patanjali tells us, Tatra dhyanajam anashayam. The meditation born fabricated bodies and minds are free from the karma and are free from the glue and mesh of karma and bondage. Thus, the deeds of such a yogi who has multiplicated himself and has multiplied himself, and although multiplied in karma potential, does not have to bother about bandha potential. He does not have to bother about bondage. Now comes an interesting question, quite an illuminating question, topic rather, the topic of karmas. Basically, there are binding and non-binding karmas. There are two types of karmas basically, but we are being mentioned four types of karmas. Karma shukla krishnam yogina trivida itaresham. The karmas of yogi are neither white nor black, neither virtuous nor vicious, but for others the karmas are threefold, either white or either black or brown, either virtuous or vicious or mixed. So, well, there are 4 types of karmas, and yogis' karmas are ashukla krishnam, neither white nor black. Therefore, there would be no result either black or white. Then, we come to an interesting maxim, well-known maxim. As are the deeds, so are the fruits. As you sow, so you reap. This maxim is even heard by the deaf ones. As you sow, so you reap. No wisdom is required to know this maxim. As you sow, so you reap. But one requires the wisdom to understand. If not, what happens? Tataha tadvipaka anugunanam eva abhivyaktihi vasananam. From karmas proceed corresponding tendencies, the vasanas. Vasanas bring up the motives. Motives bring up inclinations. Inclinations bring deeds. Deeds bring fruits. Thus we are caught in the cycle of karma. Well, this is how the past deeds are womb of present deeds, and present deeds are womb of future deeds. The maxim that we have heard several times, as you sow, so you reap, is imprecise maxim. Let us hear to the complete maxim which comes in this sutra. The real maxim therefore is, as are tendencies, so are desires. As are desires, so are deeds. As are deeds, so are reaps. As are tendencies, so are desires. As are desires, so are deeds. As are deeds, so are fruits. The fruitions do not depend upon deeds only, but motive behind deeds. The good deeds do not necessarily reap good fruits, because good deeds by bad motives will only bestow bad fruits, sour fruits. Well, as we are speaking about tendencies as vasana and vasanas, the vasanas are coming from time without beginning. Our tendencies may be collected in one life, but may actualize in some other life. That is why there is something like transmigration. We tend to compare the cause and effect relationship very closely. We tend to expect no miseries when we lead a very straightforward, candid, virtuous, simple life. We expect glories and riches if we have sincerely striven. If we don't get it, if we don't attain such fruits, we blame the luck, we blame the gods, even we blame the Almighty. At this point comes an eschatological theorem. This deals not with the psychological tendencies, but transmigrating tendencies. If one's karmas, one's deeds, call for a dog class manifestation in the next life, what happens is that on the point of death in present life, one recalls the Shvana Vasanas and therefore heads towards Shvana Yoni and takes a birth as a puppy. Now it is possible that such a Shvana Janma, such a birth as dog might have taken place several lives ago. Maybe that our past life was not dog class birth, but 10 lives ago or 100 lives ago we had taken birth as dog. How come that we recollect and recall Shvana Vasanas on the point of death at the end of this life because of our karmas? Okay, our karmas qualify us to take a dog class birth, but how do we recall Shvana Vasanas which might have taken place long time ago, several lives ago? Patanjali tells us, Jati desha kala vyavaitanam api anantaryam smriti samskarayoho ekarupatvat. The appearance of samskars is similar to that of memories. Thus, they surface not being interrupted by life state, location and time. What is this? What is this theorem? Just as the memory surfaces with no difference whether it pertains to recent past or distant past, the memory comes just like that. There is no difference whether the memory pertains to yesterday or yesteryear or yesterdecade. It surfaces the same way, whether it is memory of near past or distant past. Similarly, the samskar also surface the same way. For instance, if ensuing life is to be of dog class, and if such past life had been 1000 lives ago, the samskars would surface like the memory surfaces, without any obstacles, although several life forms have come in between, perhaps several centuries have elapsed, or perhaps several millennia have elapsed. You see, the brain may recall events of lifetime, and specific memory comes up without any browse in all incidents. So also samskara kosha triggers memory of specific life without invoking memories of intervening lives. Now comes a new question. We have the dog class memory and impressions in one of the past lives. But what about the first dog class manifestation? Where was the source for first dog class manifestation? Where was the impression for the first life as dog? The question is logical but not valid in eschatology, in metapsychology. Therefore it says, tasamanaditvam cha ashisho nityatvat. There is nothing like first life. We all have been eternal and beginningless. The soul is eternal principle, and the process of embodiment and reincarnation has been beginningless. Thus, there is nothing like first life as dog or cat or elephant. Therefore it says that the vasanas have been beginningless, and the will to be is also eternal. The vasanas have been beginningless, and the will to be is also eternal. The curious mind comes out with another question. If vasanas are beginningless and the will to be is also eternal, why not the vasanas consider as endless? Let the vasanas be then also endless. If so, what happens to Kaivalya? What happens to moksha? What happens to nirvana? Is the concept of liberation unreal? Will ever there be any enfranchisement from the vasanas? Will we be ever free from the cycle of life and death? Will we be free from the sorrows? Thus there is a round of machine gun of questions. Therefore it says, hang on. The vasanas which are beginningless need not mean that they are endless, because vasana is a body. Vasana is an assemblage. Vasana has components. It is a body of components. If they are dissembled, they do not function like vasanas. They don't remain as vasanas. Say for instance, a TV kit. The TV kit is potentially a television, but not actually, and also not functionally. If the components of vasana are dissembled, then they do not function as vasanas. They do not actually remain as vasana. The vasana is a body of 4 components, When they are dissembled, they do not remain as vasana. Therefore, it sets out propounding hetu phala ashraya alambanaihi sangrahitatvat esham abhave tad abhavaha. हेतु फल आश्रय आलंबनैः संग्रहितत्वात् येषाम् अभावे तद् अभावः. Vasana are assemblage of cause, the avidya, the motive, the purushartha, the bhoga and apavarga, the substratum, the chitta, the support, the vishayas, the objects, gross and subtle. So vasanas are assemblage of cause, motive, substratum, support. The vasana is togetherness of these factors, but each of these factors is endable and terminable. Avidya can disappear, purushartha can end, chitta can end, objects can cease. Thus, by components ending, the composite comes to an end. Thus, the vasanas can end. By the components ending, the composite can come to an end. Thus, the fear that the vasana may be endless is baseless, and postulations of Kaivalya and moksha and nirvana do not get detonated. Therefore, the aphorist says, Esham abhave tad abhavaha. Vasanas can be terminated. But a genius disciple comes out with another formidable question. He says, we are true. Our existence is true. Our vasanas are true. And vasanas are existent. Now, what is existent is not extinguished. According to Sankhya, according to ecology, what is existent cannot be destroyed, cannot be extinguished. What is non-existent does not come at all into existence. So if the vasanas are true, their termination is also not possible. If vasanas exist, how can it get extinguished? But Patanjali is undaunted and sets answering. He says, true. What exists does not cease to exist at all. What exists cannot be destroyed. But look, what is being spoken of here is that there is something like past and future. Now, past and future of a thing are not actual states and actual things. The past and future states are potential or latent states. They essentially exist, but they are terminated. Potentiality is terminated into actuality. Actuality is terminated into latency. So, there is something like termination insofar as potentiality, actuality and latency is concerned. Nothing is really essentially destroyed. Whatever exists essentially remains essentially. The water is not destroyed by fire, but it is vaporized. The wood is not destroyed by fire, but it is only reduced into ash. Therefore, aphorist says, similar is the case of vasanas here. Atita anagata swarupataha asti advabhedat dharmanam. The past and future states exist in reality as much as the present. The existence and non-existence, or appearance and disappearance, is only change in phases. Thus, in philosophical language, what is postulated is not destruction or annihilation or extinguishing of vasanas, but just latency of vasanas. You see, the past, the present and future are the states which are potential, actual and latent. They are just phases. And in such phase, the characteristics only change, the characterized remains the same. And here in nature, the characterized are gunas. The gunas are not dislodged. The gunas are ever undislodged. Whether the manifestation is gross or subtle, whether the phase is potential or latent or actual, the characterized gunas are undislodged. Te vyakta sukshma gunatmanaha. Whether they exist in gross form or subtle form, they are of the nature of guna, sattva, rajatama. The vasana is essentially guna. And we are all speaking about not absolute destruction of essential substance. Now comes a new question. If everything is essentially guna, why the classification? Like, this is water, that is fire, this is coal, that is gold, this is sound, that is form, this is hand, that is leg, this is body, that is mind, this is dead, this is alive, so on and so forth. So answer is presented in the aphorism here. Look, what is water? Water is water and not fire, because the water has a unique and distinct process of manifestation, while the fire has another. Water manifests in one way, fire manifests in another way. So is the case between coal and steel, steel and gold, gold and jewel. The guna have countless forms of transformations. Therefore, parinama ekatvat vastu tattvam. Due to an unity or singleness of mutation, there is the reality of objects. The whole creation has base on cause and effect relationship, and everything evolves out of definite process. The milk in one process becomes curds, and in another process becomes cream. Secondly, the phenomenal things come from essentially the true gunas. Thus, the phenomenal world has reality in one sense. The world is not untrue or non-existent or unreal as some philosophers think. The Buddhists are under scrutiny here. The panpsychists, the Vijnanavadins or Sarvamanovadins, they are idealist philosophers, hold that just as the rose can appear in dreams, which is not true, the rose of a wakeful state of cognition is similarly experienced. There is no difference between rose the dream object and the rose cognitive object. Therefore everything is mind. If the dream is unreal, the cognitive world is also unreal. They believe that external objects are as mental as the dream objects. They are called panpsychists. But this position of Buddhists is proved wrong. Patanjali says that external objects are not so mental because one object can trigger different reactions in different minds. Vastu samye chitta bhedat tayoho vibhaktaha pantha. When there is one object at sight, it invokes different reactions in the mind. The aphorist makes an interrogation. Nacha eka chitta tantra vastu tad apramanakam tada kim syat. The external object is not at the mercy of mind. Otherwise, what would happen to it when not cognized? What happens to the rose when it is not cognized? Is it not there? The Buddhists have a point of rebuke. Okay, they say, let the object be true and let it be independent of mind. But then, why is it That the object is true. Why is it when the object is true that it is sometimes cognized and sometimes not cognized? The aphorist replies, Taduparaga apekshitvat chittasya vastu jnata jnatam. The object is either known or unknown by the mind depending upon whether it has colored the mind or not colored the mind. It is the mind which sometimes cognizes and sometimes not. But the soul is ever knower because it is immutable. Thus the aphorist says, Sada jnatas chitta vrittayah tat prabho purushasya aparnamitvat. The mutations of mind are ever known to its master, the soul, because of its immutable nature. As the soul is being postulated, the Buddhists, who are anatmavadins, non-soulistic philosophers, they have an objection here. The soul is avyakta, the soul is achintya, nirakara, avarna, adrushya, agrahya. The soul is nominal, ingraspable, imperceptible, incognizable. The Buddhists say that where is the need of postulation of such an agnostic principle? Incognizable principle. Why should you postulate an incognizable principle? Why not endorse with our theory of Vijnanavada? It is all mind. There is nothing like soul. Everything is mind. It is all mind. One mind is cognized, the another mind is cognizer. Therefore it says, no, this is not acceptable. It is also erroneous. Na tat svabhasam drushyatvat. The mind is not self-luminous. The mind is like moon lit by sunlight. Mind is an object only fit to be known and unfit to be knower. Moreover, ekasamaye cha ubhaya anavadharanam. You see, even the sun, when shows itself, we are blind for the rest of the world. And when the rest of the world is seen, we are blind to the sun. Thus, the mind cannot be at one and the same time the knower and the known both. Ekasamaye cha ubhaya anavadharanam. The Buddhists take up the argument to the opponents. They say, look, the mind is a perennial flow, a continuous flow. Mind 1 is object of mind 2, mind 2 is object of mind 3, mind 3 is object of mind 4, and so on and so forth. Thus, it is one mind which is cognized and the another mind which is cognizer. But the aphorist presents a counter argument. Chittantara drushye buddhi buddhe ati prasangaha smriti sankarascha. If one mind is taken to cognize another, then the process will be endless and will emerge a total confusion of memory. The problem is like this. If one mind is cognized by another, who will know the final mind? And if mind 100 is to be recollected and recalled by mind 500, then memory of M to M500 and M500 to M1000 will all be recalled. Thus, it will be total mix-up and mess-up of memory. This is not experienced, this is also not logical. Therefore, the argument is disproved. This argument is disproved by reality and also by experience. Thus, panpsychism is bereft of any reality. It is hollow idealism. Thus, the reality is chitehe apratisankramaya stadakara pattau swabuddhi samvedanam. The soul is without any activity, mutation or movement, knows its own intellect, which happens by vritti sarupya or tadakara apatti, that is, by simulacrum with consciousness or identity with the consciousness. Thus, the seers, the sages, the saints, the yogis, the mystics postulate that soul is independent and uninfluenced principle of consciousness, Chaitanya Tattva. The soul is distinct than everything else. The soul is the master and the consciousness subserves it. But marvelous thing is that mind is not only knower of objects but knower of the soul as well. The soul is not incognizable. Soul is not an agnostic principle. Pure mind can realize the soul. There is something like soul realization, Atma Sakshatkar, that is possible for yogi's mind, for pure mind. So the soul is not to be merely believed or accepted as a metaphysical postulation, but can be realized. But it can be realized by samadhi, it can be realized by yoga. The chitta can experience the knowable as well as the knower. Drashtro dushyo paraktam chittam sarvartham. The chitta is both the knowable and the knower. It grasps both the objects and the soul. By getting colored, thus it is omni-objective. The chitta is omni-objective. Even the soul can be realized by chitta. The yogis attain the discernment of knower, the Purusha, the Atma, as well as the knowables and even the knowing. One and the same consciousness works for this wonder. Thus, the yogis realize that the two and only two principles are there in this universe. One is Prakriti, the other is Purusha. And these two are mutually distinct, mutually exclusive. They are Chitta and Chiti. They are Chitta and Purusha. They are Buddhi and Purusha. Therefore he says, Tad asankheya vasanabhi chitram api parartham sammatyakaritvat. The chitta is multi-impacted by countless vasana, vritti, samskar, but however acts by combination for the other one, the soul. Because it exists for the soul, the chitta exists for the soul. The consciousness is impacted by countless vasanas, countless samskars, countless vrittis, countless vikaras, countless parinamas. It is also constituted by several components such as physical, psychological, mental, emotional, metapsychical, sensory, etc., etc. Thus, it is an highly complex assembly. Chitta is a highly complex assembly. The assemblies are always for someone else and never for itself, such as a chair. A chair is an assembly of certain things, assembly of legs and arms and seat and back and screws and nuts and bolts and brackets. It's an assembly. Assembly for what? Not for itself to sit on, but for someone else to sit on. So is the case of table. Table is also assembly of legs and plank and screws and brackets and nuts and bolts, not for itself, but for someone else to use it. So also is the case of car. Car is assembly of so many parts, mechanical, electrical, electronic and so many. But the car is not for itself to drive, but for someone else to take a drive in it. So all the assemblies are always for something else, never for itself. Thus, since the mind or chitta or consciousness is an assembly, it is for someone else. Who is that someone else? It is obviously the soul. Thus the Anatmavadis are convinced that there is something as soul. In this embodiment, although not visible and not cognizable, although soul cannot be seen, the soul is there in this embodiment. Thus Patanjali establishes Atmavada, establishes the soul, and the Pakhandis, the heterodox philosophers, are rejected. If the Atma is agrahya, avyakta, agochara, incognizable, imperceptible, ingraspable, should we just believe in it and never realize it? No. Atma can be sighted, Atma can be discerned. Although invisible, it can be experienced. Who experiences? How he experiences? And what happens after that? Vishesha darshana atma bhava bhavana vinivrutti. You see, the pursuit of yoga may begin with quest for I. But the yogi who has realized I through samadhi, he is called Vishesha Darshi, and for him all the inquiry about I comes to an end. He is privileged seer. His curiosity comes to an end. Therefore, the yogi or the seer who through samadhi discerns the soul is Vishesha Darshi, and in respect of Vishesha Darshi, the privileged seer, the curiosity as to the nature and relationship with the soul ceases. When the soul is discerned with Atma Sakshatkar, all spiritual endeavor comes to an end. There is no further endeavor, spiritual endeavor. There is a grand transformation in the life of such a yogi, such a mystic, such a saint, such a sage. Patanjali says, what is this transformation? Tada vivekanimnam kaivalya prakbharam chittam. Now the mind is discriminate gravitating, unlike ours which is indiscrimination gravitated, and the Kaivalya prone, unlike ours which is bandha prone. Our mind is bandha prone. Our mind is bondage prone. Yogi's mind now is liberation prone. Our chitta is Vishaya Nimna, while Yogi's chitta now is Viveka Nimna. Our chitta is Bhoga prone, while Vishesha Darshana's chitta is Kaivalya prone. Okay, if it is a right about turn in conduct, behavior, tendency, inclination and outlook for a yogi who has had this Atma Sakshatkar, why do the thirst and hunger and sleep continue for him? Why do the natural things of hunger and thirst and sleep continue for him? Because it's a total transformation in the life. No, they do happen. All those things continue to happen as they happen to us. How do they happen? Tachidreshu pakti antarani samskarebhyaha. There are breaks, but not reversals in the Viveka Samskar, and during such intervals take place the natural things such as sleep, hunger and thirst. Do these intervals come to an end at all, or is it a continuous, endless process? No, it does come to an end. Hanamesham kleshavaduktam. The end of all these samskars of natural things such as sleep and hunger and thirst come to an end as the end of kleshas take place, which has been mentioned in this second chapter, 10th and 11th sutras. As the yogi is on the path of Kaivalya in the gravity of Viveka, yogi reaches a phase called prasankhyane api akusidasya sarvatha viveka khyate dharmamega samadhi. Then ensues the highest vairagya and the highest intellection, the culmination of wisdom, and there is constant downpour of viveka khyati called dharmamega samadhi, the downpour of supreme virtuosity. What happens with such downpour? Tataha klesha karma nivrutti. Then follows cessation of all afflictions and deeds, the kleshas and karmas, all the clouds of vritti, samskar, klesha, vasana are totally cleared. Thus, tada sarva varna malape tasya gnanasya anantyad gneyam alpam. The torrential rains of supreme virtue drive away all dirt from consciousness, all blemish from consciousness, and the knowledge of wisdom reaches infinitude, and the known remains to be paltry bit. Then what? Tatah kritarthanam parinamakram samaptirgunanam. The gunas having accomplished their purpose, there is end of their sequence of mutations. What is the sequence? Kshana pratiyogi paranama aparanta nirgrahya kramaha. Sequence is the counterpart of moment, and succession is uninterrupted sequence of moments cognized as distinct on the cessation of change. When the rule of gunas come to an end and their purpose is accomplished, what happens? Purushartha shunyanam gunanam pratiprasavah Kaivalyam swarupa pratisthava chiti shaktiriti. Having accomplished the spiritual purpose, the gunas get back in reversal process to terminal, the avyakta prakriti, and the soul is disjuncted from gunas, and isolation, liberation, kaivalya, moksha, nirvana takes place. Here ends the Kaivalya Pad. Here ends the Yoga Sutra of Patanjali. Shri Krishna Arpanamastu. Harihi Om Tat Sat. अथ सूत्रपाठः कैवल्यपादः जन्मौषधि मंत्रतपः समाधिजा सिद्धयः जात्यन्तरपरिणामः प्रकृत्या पुरात् निमित्तम् अप्रयोजकं प्रकृतीनां वर्णभेदस्तु ततः क्षेत्रिकवत् निर्माणचित्तानि अस्मिता मात्रात् प्रवृत्तिभेदे प्रयोजकं चित्तम् एकम् अनेकेषाम् तत्र ध्यानजम् अनाशयम् कर्मा शुक्ला कृष्णं योगिनस्त्रिविध इतरेषाम् ततस्तत्विपाक अनुगुणानामेव अभिव्यक्तिः वासनानाम् जाति देश काल व्यवहितानाम् अपि आनन्तर्यं स्मृति संस्कारयोः एकरूपत्वात् तासामनातित्वं च आशिषो नित्यत्वात् हेतु फल आश्रय आलम्बनैः संग्रहीतत्वात् येषामभावे तद् अभावः अतीत अनागतं स्वरूपतः अस्ति अद्वभेदात् धर्माणाम् ते व्यक्त सूक्ष्मा गुणात्मानः परिणाम एकत्वात् वस्तुतत्वम् वस्तु साम्ये चित्तभेदात् तयोः विभक्ताः पन्थाः न च एकचित्ततन्त्रं वस्तु तद् अप्रमाणकं तदा किं स्यात् तदुपराग आपेक्षित्वात् चित्तस्य वस्तु ज्ञाता ज्ञातम् सदा ज्ञाता चित्तवृत्तयः तत्प्रबोध पुरुषस्य अपरिणामित्वात् न तत्स्वाभासं दृश्यत्वात् एकसमये च उभय अनवधारणम् चित्तान्तरदृश्ये बुद्धिबुद्धेः अतिप्रसंगः स्मृतिसङ्करश्च चितेः अप्रतिसंक्रमायस्तदाकारापत्तौ स्वबुद्धि संवेदनम् द्रष्टृदृश्योपरक्तं चित्तं सर्वार्थम् तदसंख्येयवासनाभिचित्रमपि परार्थं संवत्यकारित्वात् विशेषदर्शिन आत्मभाव भावना विनिवृत्ति तदा विवेकनिम्नं कैवल्य प्राग्भारं चित्तम् तच्छिद्रेषु प्रत्ययान्तराणि संस्कारेभ्यः हानमेषां क्लेशवदुक्तम् प्रसंख्याने अपि अकुसीदस्य सर्वथा विवेकख्याते धर्ममेघ समाधि ततः क्लेशकर्म निवृत्तिः तदा सर्वावर्णमलापेतस्य ज्ञानस्य आनन्त्यात् ज्ञेयम् अल्पम् ततः कृतार्थानां परिणामक्रमसमाप्तिर्गुणानाम् क्षणप्रतियोगि परिणाम अपरान्त निर्ग्राह्य क्रमः पुरुषार्थशून्यानां गुणानां प्रतिप्रसवः कैवल्यं स्वरूपप्रतिष्ठा वाचिति शक्तिरिति इति चतुर्थ कैवल्यपादः हरिः ओम् तत्सत्।